What if the silence is louder than any scream? The heavy oak door of the upscale apartment didn't betray its usual groan when it swung inward. Delilah Laurent, stepping into the hushed entryway, moved with a calculated quietness, perhaps bracing herself for a confrontation, or perhaps hoping for the familiar sounds of sleep. But the stillness that enveloped her was not merely an absence of noise. It was an emptiness, surgical and absolute. There were no worn sneakers by the entry console, no vibrant scarf draped over the coat rack, no lingering aroma of Caleb Cole's morning espresso, a scent that once anchored their home. "Caleb," she murmured, her voice tentative, echoing unnaturally in the vast space. It was then that the stark reality began to assert itself. The intricate, hand-carved chess set they'd received for their 10th anniversary, gone from its pedestal. The keys to the vintage roadster she secretly detested vanished from their hook. The entire wall of his meticulously curated art books, his array of charging cables, and even the threadbare oversized sweater she'd once draped over herself on lonely nights. All gone. Just as the chill of realization settled in, her sleek smart device vibrated. A coded message from him. 3 cryptic words. "Your answer awaits." Her designer heels clicked a dissonant rhythm on the polished concrete as she moved into the minimalist kitchen. She hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features, before her gaze fell upon a framed, abstract piece she'd always loved, hanging centered on the wall. Taped to its canvas was a plain, unadorned envelope. Inside, a single stark sentence. "You claimed you wanted clarity. Now the past demands its due." The note fluttered from her fingers, a single white feather descending to the floor. And in that moment, she knew. This was no tantrum, no furious outburst, no shattered porcelain. This was a deliberate surgical severance. What if this wasn't a threat, but a definitive end? She had never truly believed he would walk away. And if you're wondering what precipitated such an unforgiving departure, let's rewind. In precisely 72 hours, his carefully constructed world would crumble. 3 days prior, she had left the apartment adorned in a deep jade satin gown, a garment usually reserved for their most intimate celebrations. She announced her intention to attend Jaden Silas's birthday gathering. "It's entirely innocent," she'd assured him, her tone breezy. "He's invited a whole crowd." Caleb remained silent, offering no protest, no desperate plea. He simply stood, a silent sentinel, as she misted herself with a signature perfume and moved as if he were invisible. At the threshold, she turned, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Don't bother waiting up. It's at a rooftop lounge across town. I might just crash there." And crash she did, spectacularly. Yet that wasn't the shard that tore through Caleb's composure. The true devastation struck the following morning, when she didn't even bother to fabricate a lie. The morning after she'd spent the night at her ex-lover's place. Caleb sat in the window seat of their living room, pretending to lose himself in emails on his tablet. His gourmet coffee, brewed with meticulous care, had grown cold an hour ago. The antique grandfather clock in the hallway chimed past 9, then 10:12, then 11:03. No digital ping, no incoming call, just an agonizing silence that stretched taut and thin. At 11:47, the distinct hum of her electric vehicle announced her return. He didn't rise. He didn't even shift his gaze from the street below. The front door opened with an unnerving normalcy, as if she had merely run a quick errand to the corner market. She entered, a soft, tuneless hum escaping her lips. It wasn't until she reached the entryway that she registered his still presence. "Oh, hey, you're awake." He offered no reply, his eyes simply fixed on her. She was still in the same shimmering jade gown, her delicate heels clutched in one hand, her fiery red hair a disheveled cascade, and her subtle makeup smudged around the edges, betraying the night's revelry. He waited. He afforded her the dignity of initiating the conversation. She drew a deep breath, then offered a casual shrug. "I honestly didn't intend to stay over. It just got incredibly late. It seemed foolish to risk driving home while exhausted." That was it. No contrite whisper, no elaborate fabrication, just a flimsy half-truth tossed out like crumbs to a bird. He asked quietly, his voice a low thrum. Did you sleep with him? She rolled her eyes, a familiar, dismissive gesture. Are we truly going to delve into this drama again? Yes, he affirmed, his gaze unyielding. We truly are. She held his stare for a long moment, then let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Wow, you genuinely are that insecure, aren't you? It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a display of shock. It was a sneering mockery, as if he were a clingy teenager attempting to decipher hidden meanings in a vapid text exchange. You vanished into your work for 2 months, she accused. Perhaps if you had extended a modicum of attention, my way once in a while. He stood, not abruptly, not in a fit of rage, simply, completely done. You won't manipulate me into this, he stated, his voice flat. What exactly is this? She snapped, her voice rising. Another one of your theatrical episodes? He walked past her without a word. He ascended the open staircase, retrieved his travel bag from the walk-in closet, and completed his packing. Most of his possessions, his collection of rare vinyl, his carefully cultivated plants, his cherished first edition novels, had already been discreetly moved the previous evening, while she was engrossed in memory games at Jaden's soiree. He'd secured a minimalist loft apartment in the adjacent district. Nothing ostentatious, just enough raw, unvarnished space to breathe without feeling suffocated by her perfume and pervasive denial. She followed him to the landing, now visibly stunned. Wait, what are you doing? Are you seriously leaving? Caleb, what in the world are you doing? He turned then, truly looking at her. She no longer exuded power. She didn't appear wild or liberated, or even genuinely angry. She simply looked terrified. You're not furious I stayed over, she whispered, a dawning realization in her tone. You're furious I didn't beg for your forgiveness. He zipped his bag with a quiet finality. I'm not furious, he said, his voice measured. I'm awake. And that was the day she grasped the profound truth. This wasn't merely a phase. This wasn't a temporary chill. This was a man who had spent his last night waiting, and he would never wait again. By the time he stepped into the new loft, his legs felt like they'd traversed years, not miles. Not from physical exertion, but from the weight of everything he'd shed with each deliberate stride. The apartment was small, remarkably quiet. No ghost of her perfume clung to the pristine curtains. No framed photographs served as bittersweet reminders of laughter that now, in hindsight, felt forced. Only silence. And for the first time in months, it didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like peace. Can a single decision truly reshape your entire future? He hadn't intended to send her anything immediately. He'd half expected a call, a tearful appearance, some shift in her. But for 2 full days, there was nothing. Not a solitary text, only the occasional, delivered confirmation on their dormant message thread. No response, no missed calls. That profound silence solidified what he needed to know. She hadn't sought out Jaden's company to punish him. She'd done it because she desired it, fully assuming he would remain, a fixed point, awaiting her return. On the third morning, he made one final pilgrimage to the apartment. According to the magnetic calendar on the refrigerator, she was at work. The space felt hollow, not just from the absence of his belongings, but from the collapse of routines that no longer held meaning. He ascended the stairs, not out of curiosity, but to leave a single, final message. She possessed a curious habit of scrawling little affirmations on a small chalkboard near the kitchen, where they'd once meticulously planned their week. Don't forget to smile, or big day, be bold. He'd once found it charming, often adding his own playful replies or silly doodles. The chalkboard was blank now. It had been for months. He taped an envelope to it. Nothing dramatic, just plain white. Inside was a photograph from last summer, captured on a hiking trip atop a sun-drenched mountain. She was laughing, head thrown back, a vibrant yellow tunic billowing in the wind, his hand gently resting on her waist. He had looked at that photo the night she'd gone to Jaden's gathering, not out of nostalgia, but because it vividly reminded him of who they used to be and who he kept desperately pretending they still were. Alongside the photo was a simple, handwritten note. If you ever question why I left, Look at this and ask yourself when we stop being these two people. No accusations, no hint of vengeance, just a memory, a mirror, and a message she couldn't possibly ignore. He didn't slam the door when he left. He didn't want the sound to reverberate in her mind like a threat. He wanted her to walk into that kitchen and see something she hadn't seen in months. Not her reflection, but the essence of the person she once was, and the man who had finally ceased chasing her ghost. Later that evening, a notification pinged on his smart device. A single message from her. "Why are you doing this?" He offered no reply, because if she had to ask, she wasn't ready for the answer. He had believed the silence would bring clarity. He had believed stepping away would afford him the space to grieve, and perhaps even to forgive. But he was wrong, because what followed was not peace. It was something far darker. The kind of realization that twists in your gut, forcing you to question whether you had ever truly known the person with whom you'd shared a life for a decade. This isn't just a story, it's a blueprint for escaping the quiet kind of heartbreak. It began 2 days after he'd moved out. He was seated on the well-worn leather sofa in his new loft, a relic from his first bachelor apartment, when his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. For a few tense seconds, he debated simply deleting it. He wanted no more pain, no more agonizing answers. But curiosity possesses a cruel knack for slipping through cracks you believed were perfectly sealed. He tapped play. The footage was shaky, amateurish, clearly a party. Distorted music pulsed in the background, punctuated by loud voices and careless laughter. Then the camera steadied, and he saw her, Delilah, perched on Jaden's lap, not beside him, but on him, her arms draped around his neck, Jaden's hands tracing a familiar path up her thigh, as if no time had passed since their college days. She was laughing, that uninhibited, slightly tipsy laugh she used to reserve for nights when they were alone and genuinely happy. And then she kissed him. Not a fleeting peck, not a drunken misstep, but a kiss heavy with history, a kiss that declared, "I remember this. I miss this." What I'm about to share changed everything I thought I knew about trust. He paused the video, the image frozen on their lips. His hands were trembling, not from anger, but from the icy grip of a dawning realization. He stared at the static image of her face pressed to his and wondered, had she already moved on before she even walked out that door? Or was this her twisted version of moving on? The sender remained unidentified. He texted back, "Who are you?" No response. Just a silent, chilling reminder that someone out there wanted him to know the truth she had long dared to conceal. He remained there, the video still open, the scene replaying endlessly in his mind. He'd experienced anger before, hurt, certainly. But this felt different. This wasn't mere carelessness. This was intent. She hadn't simply stayed over. She had actively reclaimed something. And the most agonizing part, she hadn't even attempted to hide it. Perhaps she believed he would never discover it. Or perhaps, more disturbingly, she simply didn't care if he did. He recalled pacing the sparse room, a gnawing question echoing, was I ever enough for her? Or was I always just the safe option? The fallback guy after Jaden no longer wanted her. The following morning, he did something he never imagined he would. He sent her the video. No accompanying message, no explanation, just the raw file. He wanted her to know that he knew, and he wanted to witness her reaction when her carefully constructed mask finally shattered. 10 minutes later, his phone rang. Her name illuminated the screen. He didn't answer. Let her sit in that silence for once. Let her hear what it sounded like when someone you'd profoundly betrayed chose themselves over closure. He wasn't angry anymore. He was finished. She appeared at his loft 2 days later. No warning, no preliminary text, just a sharp, insistent knock on the door at precisely 9:22 a.m. He peered through the security peephole, observing her, hair hastily tied in a bun, face pale, eyes slightly swollen as if from a sleepless night. She clutched her phone as though it were a shield, or perhaps a weapon. He didn't immediately open the door. He simply watched her for a beat, wondering if she would break down, if she would confess it was a mistake, a momentary lapse, that it meant nothing. He could have found forgiveness for stupidity, but never for calculated strategy. When he finally opened the door, he remained silent, simply standing in the threshold. She pushed past him, as if she still possessed an inherent right to his space, as if she still belonged within his new sanctuary. "You weren't supposed to see that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. That was her opening line. Not, "I'm so sorry." Not, "Let me explain." Just, "You weren't supposed to see that." He closed the door behind her, leaned against the cool wall, and crossed his arms. "But I did." She didn't sit. She stood awkwardly in the center of his living room, turning in slow circles, as if unable to decide which fabrication to commit to. "It wasn't about him," she finally declared, her voice cracking slightly. "It was about you, about us, about how emotionally distant you've become." That tired refrain again. "I kissed my ex because you didn't inquire about my presentation last month. I spent the night at his place because you worked late. I flirted with him at a party because I feel invisible." Do people truly hear themselves when they utter such profound self-deceptions? "I didn't go there intending to stay the night," she continued, attempting to regain composure. "I was upset. I wanted to remind you that I still mattered. I didn't think." "No," he interrupted, his voice steady, devoid of inflection. "You didn't think. You felt, and then you acted. And now you're here, attempting to repaint the inferno after the entire building has been reduced to ash." She looked at him as if she couldn't fathom his directness, as if he were supposed to collapse, or beg, or engage in a desperate negotiation. "I was hurting too," she blurted out, her voice trembling now. "Do you honestly believe I didn't notice you pulling away? Do you think I wanted to end up at a party with someone who once broke my heart for sport?" That last part stung because it was undeniably true. Jaden had cheated on her back in college, leaving her sobbing on Caleb's shoulder the night she discovered his betrayal. He remembered that night vividly. She'd called him, not her sister, not her closest friend. Him, because he was the safe one, the steady one. And now, full circle, she had run back to the very man who once devastated her, merely to prove she still possessed the power to do so. "What do you want from me, Delilah?" he finally asked. "Forgiveness? Sympathy? A second chance?" She offered no reply, because she genuinely didn't know. Because perhaps, deep down, she wasn't truly sorry for what she'd done. She was merely sorry it hadn't shattered him, as she'd hoped. She finally sank onto the edge of the sofa, and for the first time in years she looked utterly lost, like someone with no discernible plan. Not calculating, not smug, just adrift. "I thought you'd be angrier," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. He nodded. "I was, but then I realized you can't betray someone you've already stopped loving." She looked up at him, her eyes wide, and he saw something flicker within them. Regret, perhaps, or shame, but it was far too late, and they both knew it. The strange truth about heartbreak is that it doesn't always arrive in a tempest of chaos. Sometimes it slips in quietly, while you're brushing your teeth, or pouring cereal, or sitting across from the very person who once promised they'd never hurt you. Delilah sat on the edge of the couch that morning, as if afraid it might vanish beneath her. Her customary confidence was gone. Her carefully crafted words had run dry. And for once, she looked like someone who had absolutely no idea what came next. But Caleb did. He had made his decision long before she'd shown up. Before the video, before the agonizing silence, before the kiss that had clarified everything he needed to know. It wasn't incandescent rage that had propelled him away. It was crystal clear clarity. The kind that arrives only after you've been quietly drowning for years, without ever truly realizing you were submerged. He walked into the adjacent room, retrieved a small dark wooden box he had kept hidden in the back of his desk drawer, and returned. She looked up, confused. "What's that?" she asked. He didn't answer. He simply placed it on the coffee table, opened the intricately carved lid, and pushed it gently towards her. Inside lay the compact digital voice recorder he'd once purchased for work interviews, but had only ever used once, to record a conversation he was never supposed to hear. "Stop." Are you prepared to face the kind of truth that shatters illusions? He hadn't planned it. He swore he hadn't. It had been weeks, perhaps even months ago, when he was in the garage fixing a stubborn dryer. He'd accidentally left the recorder running, or perhaps fate had intervened. Later that night, when he discovered it had been active, he almost deleted the file. But curiosity, that insatiable beast, won out. What he heard made him profoundly sick. Delilah on the phone with her friend Lena Zara. Her exact words were seared into his memory. Jaden still looks incredible. I swear, if I truly wanted to, I could have him back. Caleb doesn't even notice me anymore. I'm practically a roommate with a wedding band. Lena laughed, her response a muffled sound he couldn't discern. Then Delilah's chilling reply, "No, seriously, if Caleb doesn't get his act together soon, I'm going to give myself permission to remember what being truly wanted felt like." Permission. She gave herself permission. She hadn't stumbled into that night. She hadn't accidentally crossed a line. She had meticulously planned her exit. She had authored the script, and she had delivered it with chilling precision. Delilah picked up the sleek black recorder from the box, staring at it as if its touch might scorch her. She didn't press play. She didn't need to. She knew precisely what lay dormant within. Her lips parted, then closed, then parted again, but no sound emerged. "You told me you didn't plan to stay," he said, his voice a low hum, "but you gave yourself permission to." She finally met his eyes. "You were already gone." "No," he countered, his voice meticulously level. "I was just quiet. You mistook silence for absence. That, Delilah, is on you." There was a long, aching pause, then she did something he never expected. She stood, slipped the recorder back into its box, and said softly, "I guess I really don't know who you are anymore." He nodded. "That's ironic, because I finally do." She walked to the door with agonizing slowness, as if gravity had intensified solely for her. She turned the knob, paused, then looked back. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she whispered. "I already did," he said, and she left. No slamming door, no dramatic exit, just the quiet sound of someone who had finally exhausted every last excuse. He thought that was the absolute end of it. After Delilah left his loft, he assumed they would simply drift into the kind of silence that never finds closure. He expected her to retreat into her new life, or back to Jaden, or wherever she believed she could find someone who would inflate her ego more effectively than he ever could. And honestly, he was perfectly at peace with that. He wasn't seeking revenge. He didn't require apologies. He simply craved tranquility. But the universe, it seemed, had one more devastating truth to hurl in his face. It happened on a Tuesday morning. He was halfway through a lamentable cup of gas station coffee, parked outside his office, when his phone buzzed with a call from an unrecognized number. He nearly ignored it, but a strange premonition urged him to answer. "Hello," he said, bracing himself for spam or a debt collector. But the voice on the other end was trembling. Female, vaguely familiar, yet not quite. "Caleb, it's Lena, Delilah's friend." He blinked, confused. "Okay." She exhaled sharply, as if forcing the words out. "I shouldn't be doing this. She'd absolutely despise me if she knew. But I heard what happened, and I saw the look on her face after she left your place. She's unraveling, Caleb." And then came the call that unveiled a truth so chilling, it made every previous betrayal feel like a prelude. He remained silent. "She told you everything, didn't she? About Jaden?" He offered no verbal response, allowing the silence to exert its weight. But Lena wasn't calling to test him. She was calling to confess. "Delilah didn't just go to that party to spite you," Lena said quickly, her words tumbling out. "She planned it with Jaden." His grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles whitened. "I warned her it was foolish. I told her it would spectacularly backfire." Lena paused, then continued. "But she wanted you to break. She wanted to prove a point. She told Jaden you two were practically separated," Lena confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "She made it sound like you didn't care anymore, that you barely talked, that you hadn't even touched her in months." He closed his eyes. That part surprisingly didn't shock him. They had drifted, yes, but he never imagined she would so ruthlessly rewrite their entire history to justify her betrayal. I only discovered the full truth much later, Lena continued, her voice heavy with guilt. She admitted it after a few too many drinks last week. She said she wanted to see what you'd do if she crossed the line, whether you'd fight for her or finally just give up. She wanted to test me? He asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Yes, Lena confirmed, but she never thought you'd actually leave. She thought you'd yell or cry or beg her to stay. She thought it would wake you up. He let out a dry, bitter laugh. It did. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Then Lena uttered something that chilled him in a way even the video hadn't. She told Jayden it wasn't serious, but they slept together. Caleb, that night, she lied to both of you. And just like that, the final, horrifying piece clicked into place. It was never truly about feeling neglected. It was about raw power. She wanted to see precisely how far she could push him before he snapped. She wanted to feel wanted, admired, relentlessly pursued. And when she realized he wouldn't play her cruel game, she didn't just lose him. She lost control. I thought you deserved to know, Lena whispered, her voice laced with remorse. I'm sorry. He ended the call without a goodbye. Not out of rudeness. He simply had no words left. His hands were shaking, not from heartbreak, not from fresh betrayal, but from an overwhelming surge of relief. Because he wasn't crazy. He wasn't overreacting. He had been profoundly betrayed by someone who had meticulously laid the trap, then deliberately walked into it herself, and finally attempted to portray herself as the victim when it all detonated in her face. And now he knew the entire, unvarnished truth. What he did next wasn't loud, but it left a scar she would feel for years. He didn't rush it. He gave himself time. Time to fully absorb the depth of the betrayal, time to grieve the version of them he once believed was real, and most crucially, time to decide how he wanted this story to conclude. Not with shouting, not with petty payback, but with clarity, dignity, and a door that she couldn't possibly close once it swung irrevocably open. 2 weeks after that call from Lena, he mailed Delilah a box. No accompanying note, no explanation, just 3 carefully selected items inside. The first was her old college hoodie, the faded gray one she used to pull on after long days, curling up next to him and whispering, "Don't let me fall asleep unless you're right here." He figured she might want it now that Jayden was firmly back in the picture. The second item was the framed wedding photograph she'd left behind. They were smiling radiantly, wind whipping through their hair, her eyes locked on his as if he were the only person in the entire world that mattered. He didn't smash it. He didn't burn it. He simply returned it. It belonged to her version of their past, not his any longer. The last thing in the box was a single sheet of crisp paper. On it, he had meticulously printed a quote she once scrawled on their bathroom mirror years ago, long before everything irrevocably fell apart. You can't grow in a place where you're constantly shrinking. Underneath, he had written, in his steady, even hand, "So I left. I hope someday you do too." He didn't know if she cried. He didn't know if she screamed or laughed or tore it into 1,000 pieces. And honestly, he didn't care. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't living in reaction to her. He was living within his own newfound peace. The loft felt immeasurably bigger now, not because of its physical space, but because of the boundless possibilities it now held. He started reading again, running again, reconnecting with old friends he'd allowed to drift away, while desperately clinging to someone who had never truly planned to stay. And you know what? He was smiling again, not a forced, polite smile, but the kind that sneaks up on you when you're doing something utterly simple, like drinking coffee in the quiet morning and realizing with profound gratitude that your heart is no longer heavy. This wasn't the ending he'd once envisioned, but it became the beginning he desperately needed. Have you ever made a difficult decision that led to an unexpected, liberating freedom? Share your story.